Hello and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast, a community of amazing people who love talking about and sharing their love for the details behind making games, whether or not they're actually based in London. I'm Oscar Clark, I'm he, him pronouns, and I'm on a quest to understand everything you wanted to know about game dev, but never dared to ask. Today, I am delighted to be joined by the amazing Sophia, who has been involved in games journalism, running the Big Indie Pitch, and a whole bunch of other amazing stuff. So rather than me butcher your backtail and history, Sophia, can you introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Sophia Drake. I'm really happy to be here. I should say first, my pronouns are she, her. Most people, I suppose, in the industry would know me as the host of the Big Indie Pitch, Pocket Gamers developer competition for indie developers. It's been running for a long time, and we've seen some great success stories come out of that. But alongside that, I do a lot of presenting and speaking at shows. I'm a content creator for Yahaha. I do game scouting for various places. So I've got my finger in a lot of pies, so to speak.
Full disclosure, you do some game scouting for us as well, don't you?
I do, yes, I do, at the Fundamentally Games house, scouting out some great living games.
Exactly, that's what we're all about. Anyway, so this isn't about that. This is about us talking about what we love about game dev. And in this quest of mine, I'm genuinely trying to sort of reach out to people who understand different aspects of games and hopefully enrich us all. I mean, I'm genuinely intrigued to sort of continuously learn. I think continuous learning is really important. And I think from your experience, I think some of the things I think is really interesting is the way that we've seen game studios coming and pitching their game to industry veterans, diehard, tired, cynical individuals like myself, and also some very clever people too, not me, who will then receive this pitch in a tiny amount of time. And so I think, sort of to set the scene, I mean, do you want to just explain how the Big Indie Pitch works and what are the kind of peculiarities of that kind of pitching? Do you want to kind of explain a bit of that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so when people think of a pitch, I suppose a lot of the time nowadays you think of the big reality TV shows, things like American Idol, X Factor in the UK, those sorts of shows. But obviously, I've seen many pitches like that, what we think of a standard where you might get 30 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. What the Big Indie Pitch does is try to condense that all the way down just to 5 minutes. So you only get 5 minutes to pitch, and that includes the question and answer. And that might sound like a really short amount of time, too short to some people, but
It is.
it is in many ways. But the reason there is method in the madness, and the reason behind that is we take the idea that if you bumped into someone, it's like your elevator pitch. If you bumped into someone, as I've done, as I'm sure you've done at a show, maybe you got an impromptu meeting with them, or maybe you just happen to just bump into a journalist and they say, "Oh, I'm interested. What are you doing?" You probably only have a couple of minutes to grab their interest, with the idea being that if you grab their interest, you'll get a lot more time. And to be honest, I think that's true even of meetings. If you're going into a meeting blind, you probably have about 5 minutes before someone might start to turn off in some respects. So you want to
And the
hit
whole
them
elevator
strong.
pitch thing comes from only having about 30 seconds in an elevator. I mean, in a lift. Genuinely, legitimately why it was called that. And I think a lot of people, particularly in the kind of big corporates, have had that moment where you get 30 seconds with the boss, and you've got to explain why they should give you extra time, money, resources, permission to go do something. And I don't know about you, but I've had that time. I mean, it's a very different thing than if you're at a bar with your boss. It's a very different thing than when you're going into a formal meeting. But I think there's a discipline in terms of understanding, what your key messages are, what people are going to pay attention to, and also how you communicate the essential values of what you're trying to achieve. Is that a fair kind of summary?
I think it definitely is. I think everything you said's true, and I think it also has another function as well. So alongside helping you sort of refine what your essential points are, what that elevator pitch is, what makes your game in this regard, given that this is, a video game related podcast, what makes your game unique and helps it stand out. But I think that can also help you define you know, what it is you're trying to make as well. It can define your development, because once you've identified what your key areas are, you can start to focus in on, okay, this is what is resonating, this is what people are interested in, this is what's unique. So it does, of course, have an added benefit to you as well. And just to say, the thing with the big indie pitch as well is, as anyone who's seen it or done it will know, you actually run that pitch multiple times. So the idea being is trying to refine that. It's not just like a one shot and you're done. I suppose in many respects, the greater focus of the pitch, even though it's a competition, is all about feedback and networking rather than here's a prize for being first.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the crux of it. I mean, when I'm a judge, I try to give something in the session. I'm often a little kinder than I might be behind the scenes. And I don't mean that as I'm not lying. I'm not kind of trying to soft soap people, but you want people to appreciate the feedback as it is intended. And I'm a big believer that it's important to highlight for people a direction or a challenge that they can then address. I don't think it's helpful to simply slam the game. And I think that's a very kind of like difficult thing to do as a judge to those things, as opposed to being the person presenting. And the reason I think it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition, because I think there's a mirror going on here. I think in your person pitching, you want to look at the reactions of the person receiving, but as a person receiving the pitch, I think you also need to pick up on the kind of nuances of what's going on for that person, have some sort of sympathy for that process, but also leave them something useful to act on. Is that a reasonable way of looking at it?
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true. And I think the key word in everything is, you know, what key phrase is constructive feedback, constructive criticism. It's that kind of thing. I mean, obviously, as you know all too well, at the pitch, we have the live aspect where people are getting live feedback. And then afterwards, we do the private judging where it's just myself leading judges like yourself through all of the games, collecting that, so that, because I send every developer feedback afterwards. So obviously, I intimately am taking that feedback where you're maybe, you know, just being honest and straight, and then I'm making it constructive, working out how it works to help the developers. I mean, it is always constructive, but it's exactly that point you say. It's about lifting people up, not pushing people down.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
when you offer feedback, you know, people can take it in lots of different ways, and I think that's just human nature. But if your ultimate goal as someone critiquing is to help lift the person up, then there's nothing wrong with that. And
Exactly.
you can learn something from everything as long as it's constructive.
I think that's also one of the things I think is interesting, because when we're doing the judging, it's important for us to be able to get under the bonnet, particularly when you're comparing what might be otherwise really good games. Where are the weaknesses? Where are the challenges? And where are the opportunities? And sometimes that'd be commercial, sometimes that'd be artistic, sometimes that'd be core game design, sometimes it might just be the pitch. And I think one of the things that's really useful as a judge is having other judges in the room with you, able to be completely honest about their opinion on the game without having to filter, because we know that you'll filter for us, because you know where we're all coming from. You know it's coming from a warm place. You know it's coming from a desire to help. But I think if you don't have space to be completely critical, I think you miss some of the nuances, and I think that if we didn't have that kind of private judging experience, I suspect the feedback wouldn't be as useful. Is that fair?
I think so. I think there has to be, like you say, that mix between what you're offering in the face-to-face, which is constructive, but you're always constantly thinking about how you can make this constructive, which can not only sort of sometimes maybe dilute the message, but
Yeah.
it can also cause you to maybe, because you're thinking so much, not actually offer as much as you would normally. So what we kind of have in that private judging, I suppose, is what you would call just a mind dump. It's just say what you're thinking. Don't worry about it, because
Don't
we all
filter it.
know, we all know it's coming from a positive place, and I will do that filtering later for everyone, and
Yeah.
we'll work it out and make sure it's constructive. And also, because it's a mind dump, it doesn't really follow a logical pattern. It's like 1 minute we're talking about design, the next minute we're talking about pricing, the next minute we're talking about, you know, the nature of the actual pitch itself. So when I can put it all together, it follows a sort of flow of narrative. These points go together, these points go together, that sort of thing.
No, exactly. And I think that's really critical. So as someone who wants to receive that feedback, I want brutal honesty. I don't want to be soft soaped. But you know, I'm a human being too. I'm going to be upset. You know, truth is an uncomfortable shape you've got to learn to love, to embrace. I mean, it isn't going to be nice sometimes to get feedback for a game that's not working and you're not too sure why. And sometimes the game might be working, but it might not be doing the thing you wanted to do or thing you thought it was doing, and you need some way of getting under the bonnet. So I love it when I can find a way to communicate ideas in a way that's structured. And anyway, so that's one of the reasons why I love the big pitch as a recipient, and I'm yet to do it myself. I keep meaning to. I've got a couple, we're close to kind of getting to push through. But I mean, in some ways, I think if you're a smaller studio, you actually shouldn't hold back, because I'm learning a lot from hyper casual, where we're testing early. So we're doing, you know, trailers before there's even a game. And to me, the beginning pitch is a bit like that. It's like, oh, I've got an idea. I might have some art. I might have some kind of examples of how the play works. If I pitch that to somebody, surely I can only get more information about whether that's going to resonate.